The Dragonback series by Timothy Zahn. Book 2, Dragon and Soldier. Chapter 4.
Half an hour later, after a lot of jostling and confusion, the new recruits and their luggage were finally aboard the transports. The seats were hard and narrow, and the teens were squeezed together like slabs of packaged meat. Jammed against the two boys on either side of him, apologizing as his equipment poked into their ribs and wincing as theirs poked into his, Jack had to admit Allison had been right. He was just as glad no one aboard had live ammo. He tried a few times to strike up conversations, but no one nearby seemed interested in talking. Eventually, he gave up the effort and spent the rest of the trip gazing moodily at the seat in front of him. With his comm clip connected to Uncle Verge buried inside his footlocker, and with too many people pressed around for him to risk talking to Dracos, he felt strangely lonely. It was an hour before they sat down in the center of what looked like a random collection of small huts, large, prefabricated buildings, and a scattering of tents of various colors and styles. The recruits were herded off their transports and ordered into one of three long barracks buildings nestled under the trees. Jack had hoped to get a bed near one of the handful of tall, narrow windows, with an eye toward the kind of midnight computer raid he and Dracos were probably going to have to make. But everyone else seemed to want a bunk with a view, too, and he had to settle for a lower bunk pressed up against the washroom wall. It wasn't exactly a prime location, but the washroom had some windows high up in the walls that might do. The recruits spent the next 2 hours sitting on their bunks, filling out more paperwork. After that, they were taken outside into an open field and taught how to stand at attention, turn precise corners, and march in unison. Dinner time was a real treat. Jack had heard once that the stronger the army, the more disgusting its food. By that standard, the Wynyard's Edge was a very good army indeed. An early round of muttered complaints was quickly cut off by a large sergeant who ordered one of the complainers to stand at attention while he verbally took him apart inch by inch. Sergeant Grisco, someone at Jack's table whispered the man's name, rumored to be the meanest of the Edge's drill sergeants. After that, everyone ate in silence. After dinner, it was back to the barracks with orders to study their training manuals. The 10-minute warning sounded at 8:50, and at precisely 9 o'clock the lights went out. Many of the teens were caught unprepared, and there was a lot of stumbling around and clunking into bunks and each other for the next half hour. Only then, after the barracks was quiet, did Jack finally have a chance to talk to Dracos. So, he whispered, his head half under the blankets to muffle his voice, this is what it's like to be a soldier, huh?
Not precisely,
Dracos murmured back. Even in a whisper, his voice sounded odd.
It is similar, though.
Jack craned his neck to try to look down at the dragon's face lying against his shoulder. You all right? For a long moment, Dracos was silent.
This is not right,
he said.
For children so young to be sold into such a life without cause is not right.
You said you were younger than this when you became a soldier, Jack reminded him.
We were in a war for survival,
Dracos said.
There is no such reasoning here.
I suppose not, Jack conceded. Though I know there are sometimes big fights off on backwater worlds that the rest of us never hear about. The dragon shook his head. At least that's what it was. At least that is what it felt like against Jack's skin.
Cornelius Braxton would not approve of this situation.
Braxton? Jack echoed, frowning. How did Braxton get into this?
I believe him to be an honorable man,
Dracos said.
He would be strongly opposed to children being used for such a purpose.
Fine, but how did... Oh, never mind, Jack said, giving up. Sometimes Dracos's mind wandered off into the strangest bunny trails. Don't forget that he didn't build Braxton University into one of the Orion Arm's biggest megacorporations by being Saint Boy Scout. The only reason he was so nice to me was because we did him a big favor. If he had to indenture kids to get something he wanted, I'd bet he'd do it. He might not like it, but he'd do it.
Perhaps,
Draco said.
Still, you and I at least should have nothing to fear from him.
I'm not so sure about that either, Jack said, thinking back to the glint in Braxton's eye at their last meeting. I wasn't exactly telling him the whole truth about what happened, you know. I get the feeling people don't tell half truths to Cornelius Braxton and get away with it. He may not be finished with us yet. He grimaced. I'd lay odds that Arthur Nevelin isn't finished with us either.
Perhaps,
Draco said.
But I would suspect that Neverland has all he can do right now, trying to conceal himself from Braxton.
Don't you believe it, Jack warned. Snakes like Neverland can always find time for a little revenge when someone's double-crossed him, especially when they've double-crossed him as badly as we did.
A double cross implies there was a legitimate agreement to begin with,
Draco's pointed out.
You were blackmailed into assisting him.
You think that's going to matter to Neverland?
I suppose not,
Draco's conceded, his voice thoughtful. Again, Jack tried to get a look at the dragon's face. So where exactly are you going with this line of conversation? He asked. You suggesting we ask Braxton for help?
Certainly not,
Draco said firmly, his mind apparently finished with whatever it had been wandering with.
We know, you know, we cannot afford to let anyone know there was a survivor of the Valaga attack. I have simply been thinking about Braxton today.
And I'm sure he appreciates it, Jack said. Can we forget him now and concentrate on the problem at hand?
Yes, of course,
Draco said.
What do you wish me to do?
First of all, you eat, Jack said, reaching under his bunk to the napkin-wrapped slices of meat he'd managed to smuggle out of the mess hall. There isn't much here, I'm afraid. I'll try to do better tomorrow.
I am grateful.
Draco's head rose from Jack's chest, pushing up the blankets. One by one, Jack fed the meat slices into his open mouth, maneuvering carefully between the sharp teeth. It felt rather like feeding a pet dog, he thought. He quickly and firmly put the warm, fuzzy image away. Dracos had already made it clear he wasn't anyone's pet.
I can hunt if necessary as well,
the dragon said, still chewing as his head sank flat against Jack's chest again.
What is next?
The main computer system is probably in the headquarters, Jack said. It's a big 3-story gray building through the trees facing the landing area. It had a flag flying in front of it earlier.
I saw it.
Good, Jack said. He was never quite sure how much Dracos could see riding his skin that way. There may be a way to tap into the records from somewhere else, but I'm guessing the HQ is our best bet. And since they probably aren't going to let us just walk in and sift through their files during the day, it's going to have to be at night.
There will be guard patrols,
Dracos pointed out.
As well as alarms.
Right, Jack agreed. Nothing we can do about the alarms until we get a close look at them. But we should at least be able to figure out the patrols.
Yes,
Draco said. The blanket swelled upward again as the dragon raised his head from Jack's shoulder and poked his snout into the open air.
These windows do not face the proper direction.
There are some in the washroom that do, Jack said. High up on the walls. You should be able to see the HQ and most of the area around it from there.
Good.
Dracos rose higher off of Jack's skin and stretched his neck, the movement shaking his head completely out of concealment.
Hold your breath.
Frowning, Jack took a deep breath and held it. For perhaps 20 seconds, the dragon sat there like a statue, his golden scales seeming to glow in the pale light. Every few seconds, his ears would twitch, and then abruptly he nodded.
They are all asleep,
he said, dropping lightly onto the floor beside Jack's cot.
I will need your watch.
Jack handed it over. They said Reveille would be at 4:30, he warned the dragon. Don't pull a Cinderella on me.
Pardon?
Skip it, Jack said, resettling the blankets over his shoulders and rolling onto his side. It had been a long day, and he suddenly realized he was very tired indeed. Just don't be late, and try not to wake me up when you get home.